I used to believe my life was simple and solid. I'm lucky, I often told myself. Not everyone gets this. Emily Carter was my wife, my partner, my calm place. Every morning she'd say, "Did you sleep okay?" And I'd answer, "Better than yesterday," even when I didn't. She'd smile and say, "You always say that." I liked that she noticed small things. It made me feel seen. At breakfast she'd ask, "Coffee or tea?" And I'd reply, "Coffee, like always." She'd laugh and say, "One day you'll surprise me." I never did. I thought being predictable meant being dependable. I thought that was love. I worked longer hours, skipped nights out, and told myself, this is what a good husband does. Sometimes Emily would say, "You don't have to try so hard." I'd answer, "I want to." What I didn't say was that I was afraid to stop. Afraid that if I relaxed, something would fall apart. I kept giving pieces of myself away, believing I'd get them back somehow. Daniel Brooks was part of our life like a permanent fixture. "You're my brother," he told me once, gripping my shoulder. I believed him. We talked late into the night, shared drinks, shared plans. He'd say, "You're winning at life, ma'am," and I'd laugh. "Only because you're around," I'd answer. He knew everything about me, and I never questioned why he wanted to know so much. Emily trusted him too. "Daniel's like family," she said once. I nodded without thinking. Family doesn't betray you. That's what I believed. When Daniel came over, Emily would say, "Stay for dinner," and I'd add, "You're eating with us." Those words felt warm back then. There were moments I didn't understand. Emily would pause before answering simple questions. "Did you call your mom?" I'd ask. "Not yet," she'd say, eyes somewhere else. Daniel sometimes went quiet when I walked into a room. I told myself everyone has moods. I told myself a lot of things. One night, Emily said, "You've changed." I asked, "Is that bad?" She replied, "I don't know." That should have scared me, but I smiled and said, "We're just growing." Daniel nodded like he agreed. "That's marriage," he said. I trusted that nod. I felt safe. I felt chosen. I believed loyalty was permanent if you earned it. I believed love was something you could protect by sacrificing more. Standing in my kitchen, listening to Emily hum and Daniel laugh, I thought, nothing can touch this life. I didn't know then that cracks don't announce themselves. They wait until you're sure everything is unbreakable. Something felt wrong the moment Emily said, "I'm late," without looking at me. I asked, "Late for what?" She replied, "Work," then grabbed her bag. I stood there and said, "You didn't even kiss me." She paused and said, "I'm tired," like it was an explanation. I told myself, "Don't overthink it." I was already overthinking it. That night I asked, "Did I do something?" She sighed and said, "Why do you always ask that?" I answered, "Because you don't talk anymore." She said, "I talk." But her phone buzzed and she checked it fast. I felt stupid asking, "Who's that?" She replied, "Just Sarah." The way she said it made my chest feel tight. The next day, I ran into Sarah Miller outside the office. She smiled too quickly and said, "Oh, you're Emily's husband." I said, "Yeah." She nodded and added, "She's been busy lately." I asked, "Busy how?" Sarah laughed softly and said, "You know, work stuff." Her eyes dropped before she finished the sentence. I wanted to say more, but my mouth stayed closed. On the drive home, I kept thinking, "You're imagining things." Then I thought, but why does it hurt? Emily texted, "Working late again." I replied, "Okay." I stared at that word and wondered when I became someone who only replied with one word. That evening I asked, "Can we talk?" She said, "About what?" I answered, "Us." She rolled her eyes and said, "You're being dramatic." That word stayed with me. Dramatic. I wasn't yelling. I wasn't accusing. I was just scared. I said, "I feel like I'm losing you." She replied, "You're not." But she didn't touch me when she said it. Daniel called later. "You sound off," he said. I told him, "Something's wrong with Emily." He laughed lightly and said, "Man, you worry too much." I asked, "Do I?" He answered, "You always do this." His voice was calm, almost practiced. "Trust your wife," he added. I said, "I do." I wanted that to be true. After the call, I replayed everything. Emily's silence. Sarah's pause. Daniel's tone. I told myself, "You're connecting dots that aren't there." Then I told myself, "But what if they are?" I hated that thought. I hated how weak it made me feel. Later that night I said, "I miss you." Emily replied, I'm right here, but she was already turning away. I stared at the ceiling and thought, how can someone be here and gone at the same time? My chest felt heavy, like something was pressing down from the inside. I got up and stood alone in the living room, lights off, phone in my hand. I realized then that nothing had actually happened yet, but something had changed. Trust didn't break loudly. It slipped, it whispered. And standing there in the dark, I understood that silence could hurt more than any argument ever could. I wasn't trying to spy, I was just coming home early. I heard Emily's voice before I saw her. She said, you promised this wouldn't happen here. Daniel replied, relax, he's not supposed to be back yet. My feet stopped moving, my hands went cold. I told myself, you misheard. Then Emily said my name. Say it again, she whispered. Daniel laughed softly and said, you know I care about you more than he ever did. My chest felt like it cracked open. I stood frozen, hidden by the wall, listening to my life fall apart in full sentences. Emily said, this started as a mistake. Daniel answered, no, it started because you were lonely. She didn't deny it. I wanted to step out. I wanted to scream. Instead, I stayed silent. Emily said, what if he finds out? Daniel replied, he won't. He trusts us. That word hurt the most. Trust. I felt stupid for giving it so freely. Emily sighed and said, I hate lying to him. Daniel answered, then stop feeling guilty. She said nothing. My heart was racing, but my body felt numb. I thought, this isn't real. Then Daniel said, we just need more time. Emily replied, time won't fix this. He said, it will if he never knows. I leaned against the wall, barely breathing. Every word felt planned. Every pause felt rehearsed. I stepped back quietly and left the house without a sound. Outside, I sat in my car and stared at the steering wheel. I whispered, okay, like I was agreeing to something. I didn't know what else to say. I drove without direction, replaying their voices again and again. Rage burned in my chest, then vanished into something heavier. I called my brother. Mark answered and said, what's wrong? I tried to speak, but nothing came out. He said my name again, slower. I finally said, can I come over? He replied, of course. When I arrived, he looked at me and said, you look like someone died. I said, I think something did. He waited. I couldn't say it yet, Mark asked. Did she hurt you? I nodded. He said, how? I stared at the floor and whispered, with him. He went quiet. Daniel? He asked. I nodded again. Mark clenched his jaw and said, are you sure? I said, I heard them. My voice cracked. I heard everything. He said, what are you going to do? I shook my head. Nothing, I answered. Not yet. Mark looked confused. You can't ignore this. I replied, I'm not ignoring it. I'm surviving it. He didn't argue. He just sat with me while the silence screamed. That night, I lay awake thinking about every memory, every laugh, every promise. I realized the truth wasn't just that Emily betrayed me. It was that Daniel helped her do it. The two people I trusted most didn't just break my heart. They planned it. And somehow that hurt more than the betrayal itself. I didn't confront Emily. I smiled instead. She noticed. You're quiet, she said. I replied, just tired. She watched my face and asked, are you sure? I nodded and said, of course. Lying felt strange, but silence felt safer. Inside, my chest burned, but I kept my voice calm. At dinner, she said, you didn't eat much. I answered, not hungry. She pushed her plate away and said, you've been distant. I wanted to laugh. I said, you think so? She hesitated. I just feel like something's off. I met her eyes and said, you're imagining things. The words tasted bitter, but I used them anyway. Every day after that, I watched and listened. Emily texted more, smiled less. When I asked, who are you talking to? She replied, work. I said, sounds important. She said, it is. I memorized times, names, patterns. Silence gave me space to think. Anger wanted noise. Control wanted quiet. Daniel called and said, you good? I answered, yeah. He said, you sure? I replied, why wouldn't I be? He laughed and said, just checking. His voice sounded careful. I ended the call first. That felt new. I started saving messages, dates, screenshots. I hated myself for it, but I hated being blind more. One afternoon, I met Lisa Turner while filing paperwork downtown. She smiled and said, You look lost. I answered, I probably am. She laughed and said, aren't we all? I mentioned marriage, stress, confusion. She said, protect yourself before you protect anyone else. She didn't know how deep that landed. I asked, what does that even mean? Lisa replied, it means silence can be smart. People reveal more when they think you don't see. I nodded like it was casual advice, but my hands were shaking. I thanked her and left with clarity I didn't expect. At home, Emily asked, you seem calm. I said, I feel clear. She smiled nervously. That's good, she said. I answered, yeah, it is. I realized then how powerful calm could be. It scared her more than anger ever would. At night, I lay beside her, staring at the ceiling. I thought, don't break yet. I thought, not now. I was still breaking, just quietly. Every secret I uncovered hardened something inside me. Love turned into distance. Pain turned into focus. One evening, Emily said, do you still love me? I replied, I'm still here. She didn't ask again. That silence said everything. Standing alone later, phone in my hand, evidence saved, plans forming, I made a promise to myself. I wouldn't explode, I wouldn't beg. I would disappear on my terms. But before I vanished from her life, I would reclaim mine completely. I kept acting the same. I kissed Emily goodbye, asked about her day, and listened like nothing had changed. She started relaxing. You've been different, she said one morning. I asked, different how? She replied, calmer. I smiled and said, I stopped worrying so much. She nodded like that made sense. She didn't know calm was just control. Emily grew careless. She left her phone face down, then forgot to lock it. She said, Daniel thinks you're doing better. I asked, yeah? She said, he's relieved. That word told me everything. I said, tell him I'm fine. She said, I will. She never asked why I sounded distant. Daniel changed too. He called less, spoke louder. You good, brother? He asked. I replied, never better. He laughed and said, told you it would pass. I thought, you think I broke and healed. I didn't correct him. Weak men are underestimated. That helped inside. I was fighting myself. Part of me wanted to scream, how could you? Another part whispered, wait. I still loved Emily, or maybe I loved who I thought she was. I hated her. I hated myself for loving her. Every emotion lived together, loud and sharp. At work, I met Kevin Moore. He was quiet, focused, invisible. I said, you ever feel like starting over? He looked up and said, every day. I laughed softly. If someone wanted a fresh start, I asked, how hard would that be? Kevin shrugged. Names change. Addresses change. People don't look too closely if you don't want them to. He said it like advice, not a secret. I said, you've done this before? Kevin smiled slightly. I've helped people disappear from paperwork. I didn't tell him why I needed it. I just said, I might need help. He nodded. When you're ready, that was enough. At home, Emily said, you seem lighter. I answered, I let go of things I couldn't control. She smiled and said, I'm proud of you. The irony almost broke me. Instead I said, me too. Saying it out loud made it real. I was letting go. Nights were the hardest. I'd lie awake thinking, am I a coward for planning quietly? Then I thought, am I strong for not exploding? Revenge didn't feel like yelling anymore. It felt like patience. It felt like waiting until I no longer needed them to hurt. Daniel texted, drinks tomorrow? I replied, can't, Izzy. He sent, you've changed. I typed, people do. I watched the message send and felt something settle inside me. I wasn't plotting anger. I was planning freedom. Love had turned into strategy. Pain had turned into clarity. I wasn't the broken husband anymore. I was a man preparing his exit, one calm step at a time. I sat across the desk and stared at the form. The clerk said, full name. I answered with the name that had carried my life. She asked, reason for change? I said, personal. Mark sat beside me and whispered, you don't have to do this. I looked at him and said, I do. The pen felt heavy. I thought, I am killing a name, not a body. The clerk said, initial here. I did. Sign here, she added. My hand shook. Mark said, running won't heal you. I replied, I'm not running. He asked, then what is this? I said, survival. While she typed, Mark leaned closer. You're erasing years, he said. I answered. They erased me first. He sighed and said, You loved her. I nodded. I loved the idea, I said. Not the truth. The clerk slid the paper back. This makes it official, she said. I stared at the line. I remembered my old name on wedding cards, on paychecks, on promises. I remembered saying, I'll fix it, and meaning myself. Mark said, You're scared, I said. Yes. He said, Good, courage starts there. I sighed. The sound of the pen felt final. The clerk stamped the page. Congratulations, she said, smiling like this was a birthday. I didn't smile. I felt empty and clean at the same time. Mark asked, Who are you now? I answered, Someone who won't beg. We walked outside. Mark said, What about the photos? I said, They're staying. He asked, The house? I said, Sold. He asked, Her? I paused. Gone, I said. He grabbed my shoulder. You're not a coward, he said. Cowards hide. You're choosing. That night, I boxed my past, Emily's notes, our pictures. I said out loud, Thank you, and closed the box. Mark watched and asked, Any regrets? I said, Only waiting. He nodded and said, Then go. At the door, I looked at the name on the papers. I said, This is the last time. Mark replied, Make it count. I stepped forward, carrying nothing but a future. I walked away from my old name, knowing I could never return. I stopped and called Daniel, then ended the call before it rang. I told myself silence is mercy. Mark asked, Are you sure? I said, I'm sure enough. We talked about fear, about mistakes, about how names can trap men. Mark said, Promise me one thing. I asked, What? He said, Don't disappear from yourself. I answered, That's why I'm doing this. We shook hands like strangers who understood too much. I folded the papers, placed them in my jacket, and felt lighter. I didn't hate my past. I honored it by leaving. I breathed in and said, I'm ready. I remembered Mark saying, Names are doors, and I answered, Then I'm opening one. He smiled and said, Walk straight. I promised I would. My phone buzzed with Emily's message, and I didn't read it. I said, Later, to the ghost of my life. Mark asked, Do you forgive her? I said, Not today. He said, That's honest. I took a step, then another. I felt grief, relief, and resolve standing together. I whispered goodbye, not to her, but to who I was. The city felt wide. The future felt quiet. I kept walking. I thought about tomorrow and said, I'll learn. I thought about yesterday and said, I survived. Mark said, Call me. I said, I will. The path felt firm under my feet. I chose forward motion, steady breath, and a clean start without looking back again. I kept my promise today. I disappeared the next morning. No note, no goodbye. Just absence. My phone stayed off. By evening, Mark texted, She's calling everyone. I replied, Don't answer. He said, She's scared. I typed, She should be. Emily left messages I didn't open. Mark told me what she said. Where is he? She asked. Did he say anything? Mark answered, No. She cried, This isn't like him. Hearing that almost broke me. Almost, I said. Tell her nothing. Mark replied, You're cold. I answered, I'm alive. Days passed. Daniel texted Mark, not me. Have you heard from him? Mark said no. Daniel wrote, This is crazy. I laughed quietly. Crazy was trust in him. Silence felt like oxygen. I could finally breathe without explaining myself. In my new city, I met Rachel Adams at a coffee shop. She said, You look lost. I answered, I am. She smiled and said, That makes two of us. We talked about small things. She asked, Where are you from? I paused and said, Somewhere far. She nodded like that was enough. Rachel said, You don't talk about your past. I replied, I'm learning to like that. She said, Good. People are more than their history. That sentence stayed with me. She didn't ask who hurt me. She didn't need to know. She saw me as I was, not who I had been. At night, loneliness crept in. Freedom felt wide and empty. I thought forgiveness would fill this. Then I thought, I'm not ready. I told myself, escape is easier. It was. I missed familiar sounds, not familiar people. That mattered. Mark called and said, Emily went to the house. I asked, What did she say? He replied, She said she doesn't understand. I said, Understanding wasn't her strength. Mark sighed. She's hurting, I answered. So was I. He didn't argue. Rachel asked, why do you flinch when your phone buzzes? I said, old habits. She said, you're safe here. I believed her. Safety felt new. It felt earned. One evening, I stood across the street from my old place. Lights on. Movement inside. My phone buzzed with another message I didn't read. I watched without feeling seen. I thought forgiveness would pull me back. I stayed still. I realized then that vanishing wasn't about punishing them. It was about saving myself. Forgiveness would come later, maybe. Escape came first. I turned away, unseen, untouched, and walked back into my new life quietly. I watched from a distance. Nothing from me, no calls, no messages, just quiet observation. Mark texted. Daniel's losing it, I asked. How? He said. Work's a mess. People notice. I replied, good. That word felt lighter than anger. Daniel's arrogance collapsed. Emails leaked. Clients complained. Mark laughed softly. He's panicking. I said, let him. I thought about every lie, every laugh he shared with Emily while I trusted him. Karma didn't need my hand. It needed my patience. Emily called Mark. Have you seen him? She asked. Mark told her, he's gone. Don't expect him back. Her voice cracked. I didn't know. I said nothing. Inside, I felt a strange calm. The person I once loved was now a stranger to me. Daniel texted Mark again. Everything's falling apart. How? Mark replied. Maybe it's just life catching up. I smiled faintly. I thought, not just life. Justice does that too. Every misstep Daniel made reminded me of how carefully I had waited. No need to push. No need to explain. Emily's friends whispered. She lost him? I heard the echoes through Mark. Yes, he said. I said, finally. Her regret was loud in their words, though she said nothing to me. That silence was satisfying. I wondered if satisfaction was all I wanted. Maybe it wasn't at the office. I checked on Kevin, quietly building my new life. Rachel noticed my smile and asked, what's funny? I said, nothing. She tilted her head. You've changed. I whispered, so has the world. It had, quietly, without me needing to act. The scales were shifting. I thought about confrontation. I wanted to call Daniel, say, remember me? But I didn't. I wanted Emily to reach out and plead. She didn't. She learned too late. That thought settled in my chest, heavy but calm. Karma doesn't knock. It walks in slowly, quietly. I watched it stride through their lives, neat and deliberate. Every slip, every failure, every doubt, the consequences of their actions manifesting. I didn't intervene. I didn't rejoice too loudly. I observed. I breathed. I realized something. I am no longer the man they thought they could break. My chest felt lighter. The fear, the pain, the waiting, it had transformed. The power had shifted. I wasn't a victim anymore. I never would be. Mark asked, are you satisfied? I said, I am ready. Not for revenge, not for anger, just for life as it should be. Karma was walking, and I was finally free to follow my own steps. The phone buzzed late. Emily. I stared at the screen. Do I answer? I whispered. My thumb hovered. I pressed, and her voice trembled immediately. Please, I need to talk. I stayed quiet. She hesitated. I know I ruined everything. I'm sorry. Her words shook me. I said nothing. Silence can speak louder than anything. She continued. I can't stop thinking about you. About us. I breathed slowly. I'm here, I finally said. She sobbed softly. I don't deserve you, she whispered. I replied, maybe not. That was all. No lectures, no accusations, just reality. I didn't mean it, she said. I never wanted. I interrupted gently. You wanted what you wanted. Her silence screamed guilt. I thought love rots without trust. I felt it then. The warmth I once carried had turned cold. I had survived. She had not. She asked, do you hate me? I said, I don't. Her voice cracked. Then why? I replied, because silence shows the truth better than words. I heard her breath catch. That was enough. My calm hurt more than any argument ever could. Emily said, I can't stop blaming myself. I answered, then don't. She asked, why aren't you angry? I said, because it's too late for that. She cried quietly. I listened, imagining the years wasted, the laughter poisoned, the trust broken. I realized closure doesn't need revenge. Closure needs acceptance. I lost you, she said. I understand, I replied. Her words trembled through the phone. I didn't know, I whispered. Now you do. I could feel her realizing the magnitude of what she had destroyed. My restraint was final. My calm was deliberate. She begged softly, "Can we try again?" I said, "No." Her silence lasted long enough for her to understand. Not hate, not punishment. Just the truth, I added. "I'm done with us, I need me." She whispered nothing. The line went quiet. I hung up. I stared at the dark screen, feeling the emptiness of victory. Not revenge, not anger, just freedom. I thought about the life I left, the man I once was. I didn't feel pride, only peace. I realized forgiveness is harder than escape, but escape is essential. Emily had finally understood my silence. I had finally understood myself. And I would never return, not for her, not for Daniel, not for anything but my own self-respect. I wasn't expecting Daniel. The knock on my door startled me. I opened it to see him, eyes red, posture slumped. "We need to talk," he said, voice trembling. I stepped aside. "Come in," I replied, my tone calm. Too calm. He paced immediately. I ruined everything. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," he stammered. I said, "It went exactly where it was supposed to." "You chose it." He stopped, staring at me. I was scared. I interrupted. "You thought nothing. You acted. That's character." Daniel sank onto my couch. "I never wanted to hurt you." "I was weak," he admitted. I leaned against the wall. Weakness explains action, or does it excuse it? He swallowed hard. I panicked. I didn't know how to handle it. I said, "Handling it would have been telling the truth." "You lied instead." He looked at the floor. "I'm sorry. I can't even look at myself. I raised a hand. "Don't explain. Just listen." He nodded, barely breathing. "Do you understand what you did?" I asked. His voice cracked. "I betrayed the one person I swore loyalty to. I don't know how to fix it." I sat across from him. "Fix it? That's not your right anymore." "Fixing it wouldn't change the past. Betrayal exposes who we really are." "You've shown yours." He buried his face in his hands. "I hate myself," he whispered. "Good, you should," I replied softly. Silence filled the room like a living thing. Daniel lifted his head, tears streaming. "Please, I don't want to lose you." "I'd do anything to—" I stood. "Stop. You don't get to bargain for forgiveness. You get to live with yourself. That's the punishment." He shook his head. I can't live like this," he admitted. "You don't need me to teach you that," I said. "You already know." "That's enough. You'll survive. Maybe you'll learn. That's not my concern anymore." He looked up, desperate, searching for anger or hatred in my eyes. All I had was calm. "I don't forgive you," I said. "I don't need to destroy you either. You'll carry your own weight, and it will be heavy. That's all you get from me." His lips quivered. I understand," he whispered. I walked toward the door, jacket on, keys in hand. Daniel followed my movement with his eyes. "I've stopped carrying your sins," I said. "I'm done with the past. Don't follow me." He didn't speak. I opened the door, stepped out into the street, and felt air on my face. Freedom tasted different now, clean, quiet, complete. I didn't look back. The man who betrayed me begged. I listened. I left. That was enough. I stared at my reflection in the cafe window. The man looking back wasn't the one who left his old life behind. He was quieter, stronger, more patient. Rachel sat across from me, stirring her coffee. "You've changed," she said softly. I shrugged. "I had to." She leaned forward. "Do you ever think about going back?" I shook my head. "Back? To what?" She asked. "The old life. The mistakes." I said. "I live forward now." "Looking back only pulls you under." She smiled faintly. "And does that feel freeing or lonely?" I laughed quietly. "Both. Freedom tastes bitter at first. Loneliness, sweeter than expected." "You realize who you were and who you can be?" Rachel asked. "Did you lose yourself?" I paused. "I found pieces I never knew I had." She studied me. "Do you ever let people in?" I looked down. "I've been afraid. Afraid that trusting again means risking the same pain." She reached across the table. "Risk isn't failure. It's proof you're still alive." Her words made my chest tighten. I said, "Pain reshaped me, but it doesn't define me." I survived it. She nodded. And now? I smiled faintly. Now I live honestly. With myself first, then with someone else if I choose. I forgive myself for staying too long, for believing in what wasn't true. Rachel sipped her coffee. You're ready to love again then? I shook my head. Not love her. Not yet anyone. But to trust myself, yes. I finally met myself again. She leaned back, eyes kind. That's rare. Most people never get that far. I said, I think we measure life by how much we survive, not by what breaks us. She asked, and are you broken? I laughed softly. No, I'm whole, just layered. Stronger for what I endured. I can carry my scars without letting them dictate who I am. Rachel smiled. You sound peaceful. I nodded. Calm doesn't mean weak. It means I choose where my energy goes. I've learned to protect it. She asked, and your heart? I said, it's careful now, honest with itself. Not bitter, not naive, just cautious. I took a deep breath. I met the man I was meant to be, not the one I lost. Pain was a teacher, not a master. I can look at my reflection and finally say, I am enough. Rachel nodded, reaching across the table. I'm glad you found him, I smiled and replied, so am I. For the first time in years, I felt complete. The past existed but no longer controlled me. I had shed fear, embraced patience, and reclaimed my life. I finally met myself again and I liked who I saw. I stood on the balcony of my new apartment, city lights stretching endlessly below. The air felt different here, lighter, quieter, mine. I whispered my new name aloud, tasting it. I am here, not the man I was. Not the one who begged for trust or clung to promises. Someone else entirely. Rachel appeared behind me, coffee in hand. Thinking again? She asked. I smiled faintly. About him. About me. About everything I left behind. She leaned on the railing beside me. Do you regret it? I shook my head. Not leaving. I regret not choosing myself sooner. Everything else was necessary to find this, she said. It sounds like peace. I nodded. It's not perfect. Nothing is. But I can breathe without fear. I can walk forward without dragging the past with me. My reflection in the glass caught my eye. The lines in my face spoke of loss, pain, and endurance. I whispered, thank you, old me, for surviving. Rachel laughed softly. You speak to yourself like a friend. I replied, because I am. I've learned to honor who I was without letting him dictate who I am now. She smiled. And your heart? I exhaled slowly. Cautious, aware, but open. I didn't vanish, I evolved. I thought about Emily, Daniel, and all the ghosts of my past life. I forgive them, quietly, I said. Not for them, but for me. I don't need revenge. I don't need validation. I need truth, and the truth is I am free. Rachel asked, and love? I said, love can wait. I am learning to love myself first. That's all that matters right now. The city hummed below, lights flickering like a heartbeat. I realized the weight I once carried, the anger, the betrayal, the silence, had transformed into strength. I could stand alone and it didn't feel lonely. It felt intentional, earned, complete. Rachel touched my arm. You seem different. I smiled, a quiet, assured smile. I am. Not broken, not bitter, alive, whole. And I'm choosing who I become each day. I looked at my reflection again. The man I used to be taught me resilience. The man I am now teaches me self-respect. She nodded, understanding without words. I said, I didn't vanish from the world. I didn't run, I evolved. I shed fear, reclaimed my identity, and finally met myself without compromise. The city lights mirrored in my eyes. I am enough. I always was, but now I know it. I inhaled deeply, feeling the calm spread through me. No one could undo this. No memory could taint it. I had chosen myself fully, unapologetically. And for the first time in years, I felt at home in my own skin. I smiled at the night, at the life before me, and whispered, I am ready for everything, and nothing can take me from myself again.